Well, President Trump has paused tariffs on most nations for 90 days, but there is one exception to the pause. That, of course, is China. The country's tariffs were raised to 125% by Trump because of China's, quote, lack of respect. Trump's tariff policy aims to make America wealthy again and was created to find more balanced trade among U.S. and its trade partners.
But critics that are out there of these tariffs are raising constitutional concerns, asking the question of whether or not the president can impose these tariffs without Congress. Judge Andrew Napolitano is a senior judicial analyst here. He joins us live on set. In your column in the Washington Times that we'd like to show the viewers and set you up real quick. It says that your title is Trump's Tariffs Raise Constitutional Questions About Presidential Taxation and Power. Can you elaborate on this?
So this argument that I'll now summarize for you was made by Senator Rand Paul on the floor of the Senate when the Senate voted 51-48 to rescind President Trump's declaration of an emergency. Now, why did the president declare an emergency? Because the Economic Emergency Powers Act of 1977, signed by President Carter, which authorizes tariffs, has the requirement of an emergency. The president said in his executive order imposing the tariffs, the emergency is the imbalance of trade between the United States and foreign nations. We're all familiar with that argument. Sure. But Congress, in the statute, defined an emergency as a sudden and unexpected event which adversely affects national security or economic prosperity. And we've had an imbalance of trade since 1934. So it's obviously not a sudden and unexpected event. This is the argument that Senator Rand Paul made, which got a majority, just a bare majority, but a majority of senators, not enough to override a presidential veto. But this is the constitutional argument. The other part of the argument is tariffs are a sales tax. And the Constitution says taxes can only be imposed by the Congress. In fact, they must originate in the House of Representatives. So can the president on his own impose a tax? And this argument is no. Now, this is not just a hypothetical argument. There is a lawsuit in federal court in Florida, a stationery company that imports its paper from China. And now they have to pay this 150% tax. It'll put them out of business. So a federal judge is going to have to address this argument. Is this a legitimate emergency? And even if it is, does the president have the power to impose a tariff? Can Congress impose tariffs? Well, of course it can. Congress can tax anything it wants. And in fact, the federal government's principal source of revenue until the Civil War was tariffs imposed by Congress, not by the president.
But could the president argue that this is an emergency? It was just ignored by every other administration leading up to mine.
You know, if you expand the definition of the word emergency, yes. But if you follow the law, sudden and unexpected, it's hardly sudden and unexpected. You know, they originally said the emergency was fentanyl. Well, that's sudden and unexpected. And then Peter Navarro and the others said, well, Mr. President, you want to impose tariffs on 100 different countries. They're not all sending fentanyl here. We need to have an emergency that is related to the issue of tariffs. They came up with the imbalance of trade, which is hardly an emergency.
And conservatives hold the majority in the House and in the Senate and have the full support.
Yeah, Senator Paul got, I think, about 4 or 5 Republicans to vote with all the Democrats. The House is not going to have a vote on it because they're worried it might go against the president, might embarrass him. Then he's going to have to veto it. Then they're going to try and override the veto, and they don't have enough votes to override.
Well, pointing all that out constitutionally, we do appreciate that, Judge Andrew Napolitano.
Sure.
Good to see you.
Thanks,
Thank
Judge.
you.
All right.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.